I attended a summit, Mobilize Recovery in Washington, D.C., and I had the opportunity to hear a powerful duo from Arkansas present their organization's process for approaching the opioid settlement dollars during one of the sessions I attended. I attended this session because even back then, more than a few county opioid abatement board members reached out to me asking me to identify esteemable peers who are being good stewards of these opioid settlement dollars. And after attending the presentation, I could tell that Arkansas was doing a good job. After a bit more research and examining Arkansas a bit, I thought that hearing how AORP got organized would be helpful. Arkansas, like Florida, has long been in the bottom of the rankings for per capita behavioral health spending, and until 2022 had yet to expand Medicaid. So we have those things in common. And while Arkansas is far less populous than Florida, Arkansas's about 4.5 or 4.25 million population and existence of rural, urban, and exurban counties is not unsimilar to our region here in the Tampa Bay area. So I invited Kirk Lane and Colin Jorgensen to join us today to present how they organize the Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership, specifically how their view of the dollars impacts their approach, how they have put their values into action, and how they have prioritized reaching out to different stakeholders to ensure smooth distribution from this fund. Specifically, I shared with them some of the questions that have been posed to me. Abatement board members have asked me, how do we spend this money as quickly as possible while ensuring accountability? How do we ensure this money goes where it's needed instead of simply to where it's easiest to spend it? How do we balance this money with federal and department money coming from the state? And also, they wanted to know if there are any other questions that they should be asking to ensure that they're doing a good job. Here to answer these questions are Kirk Lane and Colin Jorgensen. Kurt Lane serves as the director of the Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership. It's an organization formed by Arkansas's Association of Counties and the Arkansas Municipal League to administer opioid abatement funds derived from opioid settlement funding awarded to the cities and counties of Arkansas. So it's different than a county specific. This is all of the counties and cities in Arkansas that joined together to form this organization. Before this, Kirk served as the Arkansas State Drug Director from 2017 to 2022. Director Lane also has 33 years of experience in law enforcement, serving with the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office and as the Chief of Police for the city of Benton, Arkansas. He has attended the University of Virginia and University of Arkansas Little Rock. He is a graduate from the Arkansas Law Enforcement Academy, the Drug Enforcement Administration's Drug Commanders Academy, the FBI LEADA program, and the FBI National Academy 197th session. Mr. Lane currently serves as the National Board of Directors for the National Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. That's the CADCA that we know of, and the Executive Board of the Gulf States High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, or HIDTA program. He is the recipient of numerous awards in his field, including the 2021 Ramstead Kennedy Award for his leadership in the field of recovery. Welcome to the screen, Kurt. And then we have Colin Jorgensen. Colin is an advisory board member of the Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership. Mr. Jorgensen has a bachelor's degree in political science and philosophy from the University of Oklahoma and a Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Michigan. From 2004 to 2006, he worked as an associate at Wright, Lindsay & Jennings, LLP in Little Rock. From 2007 to 2017, he served as an assistant attorney general and senior assistant attorney general in the Civil Litigation Department of the Arkansas Attorney General's Office. Colin joined the Association of Arkansas Counties in 2017 as a litigation attorney, and he has served since 2018 as counsel for Arkansas counties in litigation against the opioid companies seeking monetary relief to abate the opioid epidemic across Arkansas. In January of 2019, he was appointed by the Arkansas Supreme Court to a six-year term as the chair of Arkansas Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program Committee. Colin is a dedicated public servant, and from the beginning, he has been grateful for the opportunity to serve the counties in Arkansas related to opioid litigation and the opioid epidemic. Colin is especially grateful for the opportunity to serve as a lawyer and a board member because he has lived experience with addiction and recovery. He knows that sobriety is a miracle and a gift, and to keep it, those who have it must give it away. Y'all, please welcome Mr. Jorgensen to the screen, and I am going to turn it over to them for their presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and Alan, and thank you all for being here. I believe we have a PowerPoint. Here it comes, and I'll just ask for the slides to be advanced when we're ready. If you go ahead to the advanced slide right now, and I'll give you guys an overview of what we plan to talk to you about today. Oh, that's a little far. So as Jennifer mentioned, I'm a lawyer who has represented counties in Arkansas from the beginning in the opioid litigation, which we kept in Arkansas. And I've represented almost all the counties of Arkansas. There's a similar attorney at the Arkansas Municipal League who has represented pretty much all of the cities in Arkansas. And we planned a unity strategy from the beginning of the litigation. So that is that has a lot to do with how we find ourselves where we are today. I will tell you sort of the background about that from the litigation through the formation of the Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership, how we got from suing the companies to getting some money to creating this entity to work on the abatement side for all of Arkansas in the counties and cities. And then Kirk Lane will talk to you all about what AORP has been up to in the 363 days since we launched November 4th of last year. If you could advance slide, please. So we recognized the need to sort of bring everybody together and work with our county and city officials in the very beginning. We started here at the Association of Arkansas Counties by forming a county official task force about the opioid epidemic in 2017. We got an array of county officials on that task force, and we called a meeting all day. We brought them in and we made them stay all day, and we spent most of that day training them about what we were facing and what they could do right now to help their communities with no funding. Things like education and prevention, becoming subject matter expert themselves so that they could then educate their people. Gave them some materials that we prepared, a one-pager with just facts and recommendations and things to take back home to their communities, and start doing whatever they could, because we knew it would be a long haul before we start having funding from possible litigation. And this is before we even filed. They also heard from lawyers at this time. Both lawyers like me who work for the government associations and private law firm attorneys. We kind of formed a team and offered that team to potentially represent any and all counties and ultimately cities in Arkansas. And the task force considered that and unanimously recommended that the counties move forward with litigation. They also were very appreciative of what they learned that day about the opioid epidemic and what they could do right now and take back to their communities. And they were off with their charge, and the lawyers were off with their charge. Advanced slide, please. And we got everybody signed up, and we filed a unified complaint in March of 2018, on the Ides of March 2018. What a great day that was. So our complaint was somewhat unique because, well, it is unique. It's still, we filed it in state court. That part's not unique, but we managed to keep it in state court. And we ultimately have all 75 Arkansas counties as plaintiffs in the same case together. We also have the state of Arkansas. We also have the highest population cities in Arkansas united. And actually, all 500 cities signed up, but you can't go over 100 plaintiffs or you get removed to federal court under the Class Action Fairness Act. So for legal reasons, we had to file a separate case for the rest of the cities. But the point is, we united everybody in this litigation as one big team against the opioid industry, seeking monetary relief so that that one big team can then use that money and those resources to help our people recover from the opioid epidemic. We also we really tried to get the whole industry in our complaint from the beginning. You see 65 defendants there. We went after generic manufacturers. We went after all levels from the beginning: manufacturers, distributors, retailers, Arkansas physicians. And we let them whittle it down when they could demonstrate that they were not liable for this, rather than starting with just the ones that everybody was suing and then trying to add in later. That turned out to be a pretty good strategy too, although we never managed to get to trial against anybody because of the national settlements. Advanced slide, please. So from our original complaint, we included a bunch of details about Arkansas. We didn't just copy some complaint somebody else had filed in West Virginia or something. We crafted an Arkansas unique complaint. And like this group does, we focused on overdose deaths from the beginning. Arkansas has, like most places, experienced a dramatic increase in overdose deaths. That was true then. It's still true now. Our numbers keep increasing through the latest data available. And we have the second highest prescription rate in America, in Arkansas, per capita. So that's a pretty significant factor, especially when the defense in this case is the pharmaceutical industry, because that's that's their market and that distribution chain that's implicated in these cases. Go ahead and advance slide. You don't need to know every detail about Arkansas. I'll just say on the claims that we brought against the industry, it includes the same stuff you've heard that everybody did: public nuisance, negligence, stuff like that. But we also had some unique Arkansas claims and some statutory claims. We really worked hard researching this and crafting it and pleading it in our complaint. So we had a stronger case really than if you just went with the claims that everybody was pursuing and didn't try to figure out if you had anything unique available to you from your state, which we did. So we pursued it. The Drug Dealer Liability Act claim is, had we been able to go to trial, that might have enabled us to recover from defendants damages, not just for the legal but regulated pain pill chain, but the entire resulting black market: heroin, fentanyl, these illegal drugs that clearly are spawned by that initial legal market. We could have sought to hold them liable to abate the full scope of the epidemic, not just what came from legal pills. Again, we never got to trial, but having that claim in there got the attention of the defense lawyers, and so we had to fight like hell in court for a few years before we got to where we are today. Next slide, please. So part of our unity strategy was to really show that we cared about this case and that we really wanted justice for Arkansas counties and cities and Arkansans with opioid use disorder. So we had a big press conference when we filed the complaint. We have a logo here at that time that we were using, and we got in Newsweek and CNN and all over the local press. I mean, y'all don't see that, but it made a big splash in 2018. So, and we were off. And if we didn't get the attention of the defendants from what we put in that complaint, we had it from the press in 2018. Next slide, please. Just to throw something in here about 2019, we managed to get Sam Quinones to come be the keynote speaker at our annual conference in 2019. He's the author of Dreamland, which many people consider the best journalistic work about the opioid epidemic in America. It's one of many, but it was kind of the first, and it really went into a level of detail that nobody had seen before. He's also written a follow-up now, I think, called The Least of Us. It's also excellent. So we brought Sam to Arkansas and had him speak to everybody, to our team and our unified local officials across Arkansas. Here he is with Kirk and me and some coroners and other folks, but he was the keynote speaker for our entire conference in front of about 1,000 people that year. Next slide, please. So here, this is the first significant document that we created in Arkansas to to help govern what happens when we start bringing in money and how we can use that money and how we can't and things like that. Every state and all the governments within a state has an opportunity under the national settlement agreements to create its own MOU, memorandum of understanding, to control how money will be used and flow within that state. If you don't do that as a state, then it reverts to what is outlined in the settlement agreements, and that's what controls. But you can replace that with your own ideas if you can reach agreement on that. So we did that. We chose to do that in Arkansas. I think many states have done this, and the details are as varying as there are states who have done an MOU. So ours in Arkansas, we got it signed in July of 2021, signed by the governor, the attorney general, and the counties and the cities. It's all of Arkansas governments have agreed to this. It controls how we can spend opioid settlement money on only approved purposes for abatement, just like the settlement agreements do. We agreed among the governments that if anybody is contacted by any company or group of defendants or something about possible settlement, you notify everybody else, and we negotiate together as a unified team in settlement negotiations. And we agreed how we're going to split the money when it comes in. A beautiful co-equal, like our branches of government split. 1/3 of the money in Arkansas goes to the state, 1/3 goes to counties, 1/3 goes to cities. We are an equal team of different levels of government working together to hopefully abate the Arkansas opioid epidemic. Next slide, please. Next thing we did is we, for the counties and the cities, to keep them unified and to have a place for their money to arrive in Arkansas, we created a qualified settlement fund. That's an IRS term. There's a national qualified settlement fund, which is what pays most states, counties, and cities in America from opioid settlement money. And we figured out that if we have our own QSF, it's super easy for the national to pay into ours. Also, it gives us very good accountability measures and supervision, because the way we did it is we filed a new state court case in Arkansas, supervised by an Arkansas judge, and we asked that judge to enter an order creating this qualified settlement fund and appointing an administrator of this fund and a custodial bank and setting it all up so the finances are established before we even got paid the first dollar, and is supervised by an Arkansas court. We have an expert at the top, the QSF administrator, who will make the final decision on issuing any check of county and city money for any purpose. And that's 2/3 of Arkansas's money has this belt and suspenders and this entity that we created to essentially administer it on the finance side. Very important. We're very glad we did it. It has worked very well, and continues to work very well today, and we expect it to work well through the final payments 15 years from now, however long this money lasts. Next slide, please. And we finally we did distribution agreements among the counties and the cities. There's one for each, but they're substantively the same. These are exhibits to the Arkansas MOU. So they're part of the global MOU decided by all Arkansas governments, but they are agreements among the counties for the county distribution agreement and the cities for the city distribution agreement about their 1/3 each. We have to be able to figure out how to, the splits among them for certain purposes, but we never envisioned that we would be sending individual checks or having them send individual checks to 75 counties and 500 cities. We would face this problem where many of them would not know how to handle the money. Nothing would get done. And they didn't, and they recognize this. Our county judges, our mayors, they knew that it's not going to be helpful for them to get 12 checks a year in different amounts, and they're each $150 or $2,000 or whatever, and they all have all these strings attached, and they got to be appropriated and go through count. Anyway, nobody wanted to have to do it that way, so that's why we created the system to have the money go to the QSF. And then under these distribution agreements, we created the Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership, which is a partnership of all the counties and all the cities through their organizations, the Association of Counties where I work, the Arkansas Municipal League, that's just like us for cities. The directors of those organizations are at the top of this partnership, and we have an entity to keep the money safe and supervised and never going to get in trouble with that and be able to handle auditing and everything else. And we have an entity created to administer the abatement program for the counties and cities in Arkansas. Next slide, please. We went into quite a bit of detail about AORP in these distribution agreements to get it all on paper and established. The mission statement is fairly typical, what you'd probably see from any sort of entity created in a state to administer settlement money. Next slide, please. And we also came up with, here's our staff, which AO was authorized to have staff, a director, and Kirk Lane's here with us, but we also have Tanisha Barnes and Joy, who's on this as well. And you can see all of AORP staff are awesome. I mean, we got exactly the right people to run AORP, y'all. I mean, it's just like steel. Next slide, please. That part has also been working really well, by the way. The distribution agreements call for the creation of an advisory board for AORP. This is recommended in most of the settlement agreements. So we've done that, and we actually impaneled and constituted and created the advisory board and got everybody appointed in place before AORP launched. We have 12 folks on the advisory board, and we've got just about every category of experience or expertise or perspective that you can think of that might be relevant to this. Very diverse, very rich in experience and knowledge that you want to see on a board like this. And this advisory board considers every single project that is recommended by Kirk for spending 2/3 of Arkansas's money. So, I mean, we're a small state, 3 million people. Our money is roughly 1% of the national. But in terms of what's going on in Arkansas, this is most of the money, and this is the board. And it's a working board. We get giant packets to read before every meeting. Everybody reads the stuff. Everybody has questions. We have robust discussion. Our last board meeting, I think, was like 5 hours long to approve less than 10 projects. Next slide, please. Another thing we did in the distribution agreements is we essentially codified the principles that will govern this partnership. And I'm not going to go through them all. They're on the website. If anybody is looking for a good set of governing principles for a similar organization, we're strong believers in ours. We thought through each one of these. We discussed, we refined, we spent a lot of time on coming up with what our principles will be, and we use them. Kirk uses them. When you have to turn somebody down, it's usually because they have not demonstrated that they can comply with something in here. Or, next slide, we also did guidelines specifically for the applicants, sort of codifying them in the same way. And these are basically your basic requirements that must be met for something to be eligible to be funded. It doesn't mean you're guaranteed funding. But if you can't check all the required boxes, it's not going to be funded, whatever it is. If you can, it may be. But we have limitations in funding, and we're trying to plug gaps, and we don't want to duplicate. There's a lot of reasons why you might still be denied, even if technically you're compliant. These are also on the website. If you're interested, please go check them out. Feel free to plagiarize any of this stuff, y'all. We're not inventing the wheel or trying to keep anything for ourselves. We just tried to come up with what is right for what we plan to do here in Arkansas. And if it works well for somebody else, hallelujah. Next slide, please. So we're anticipating a little over 200 million across the life of this in Arkansas, maybe more, but we can pretty much guarantee at this point a little over 200 million. That's a big number for Arkansas, similar to your 3 billion in Florida. And every single proposal, before it gets to the end and a check is issued and somebody actually receives some of this money, you got to have sign off from the county judges. They're not law judges. They're executive branch of the county. They're like our county commissioners. The county judges and the mayors from wherever you're going to operate. It may be plural. It may just be the one if you're in a particular city. They have to literally sign off on that before they even submit the application. Their signatures are a requirement for every application, and that is because this is their money. This is county and city money, and we want them to have the initial vetting, but we also want their buy-in. We want them to be proud of what they're doing in their community. We want them to celebrate with these people who are bringing help to their communities, and we want them to partner with them. And that has been working pretty well. We also have to have approval from the AORP director, that's Kirk. The AORP advisory board, typically we require unanimity. If anybody, essentially anybody can veto a project if they vote against it. So we get the full board to say, yes, that's a good one. And then both the directors of the county and city organizations have to sign off. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the final decision is made by that QSF administrator, who's a lawyer and an accountant and everything else you can imagine. And we've never sent one to him so far where at the end, he said, you know what, this is non-compliant, or we can't fund it for some reason. But he would if we did. So we have full confidence that when we approve a project, we're not going to get in trouble for not fitting with Exhibit E or however else you might get audited or otherwise. And nobody individually even has any ability to do anything wrong because the QSF administrator controls the money flow. So we almost can't have fraud, not from the people who in this chain up to the QSF administrator, right? We've got to keep our eyes on the applicants and follow up with them and have data reporting and compliance and things on that end, but I'll leave that to Kirk. Next slide, please. So we launched November 4th of last year. We made the front page of the Arkansas paper. You can't hardly see it, but that's Kirk there. You can tell by the bald head right in front of that. That's Kirk on our front page. That's Chris Valines, who's the director of the counties, at the podium on our launch day. Next slide, please. And we were off and running, and I'll let Kirk take it from there. I'll just tell you about one more sort of law side of things. Just last week, we filed an amicus brief in the Purdue Pharma bankruptcy case at the United States Supreme Court. And by we, I mean the amici are the Arkansas Opioid Recovery Partnership, the Association of Arkansas Counties, and the Arkansas Municipal League. This unified team of Arkansas counties and cities that we've created filed an amicus brief in that case at the U.S. Supreme Court. We have taken the position, as have, I believe, all of American governments, that the court should approve the bankruptcy plan that allows distribution of $5 or $6 billion of money from the Sackler family, not just the Purdue corporate assets, which are much less, but all this money that the Sackler family proposes to contribute in exchange for civil immunity for them. It raises some issues with bankruptcy law. It's kind of novel, it's kind of new, but it also really fits this particular case and this particular bankruptcy. And that's a lot of money. So we advocated that the court should bless that and send the money out. And we were asked to do this amicus brief by National Council because we were able to write a brief that said, we've received some money in Arkansas and look what we've done already. Look how we've saved lives already. Look at all this stuff we're doing. You're about to hear from Kirk. Imagine what we could do if you would give us this Sackler money as well, and we can prove that we can do good things with this money. So that's why we did an amicus brief. To anyone who thinks the Sackler's family should not be let off so easy, I would say this deal does not give them criminal immunity. If you think they're criminals, prosecutors can still pursue criminal charges against them. Nothing about this deal prevents that. And most people believe we would never get this much money from them if we sued them into bankruptcy because all their money is in other, is offshore and stuff like that. So it's probably more money than we would ever get 5 or 10 years from now if we sued them to nothing. And if you think something worse should come of them, then the criminal law remains available. I'll stop there. I'm going to hand over to Kirk, and he's going to tell you about what we've been up to since November 4th of last year. And I meant to say on the front end, feel free to interrupt with questions or whatever anytime. We're not entirely sure what is more or less helpful for y'all. So, let us know. Thank you.
So good morning. I'm Kirk Lane. So I'll take it from here. So the beginning of the Opioid Recovery Partnership is the name that we came up with. We wanted to do something of building partners, not only from the legal team that came together with the cities and the counties, but also the partners that we would develop throughout the state to abate the opioid epidemic. Next slide. So we started with our leadership team, and you can see myself and Tanisha Barnes, both of us came from the state. And so we were doing this work on the state side with state and federal dollars, overseeing prevention, treatment, recovery, enforcement in some forms. And then also the executive directors of the cities and counties, you can see up there, Chris Valines and Mark Hayes. And then we hired our best hire, Joey Spence, to help us with the data. Next slide. We started, and we knew that we needed an advisory board, and we wanted to select a board without political capital, is a word that I use, without any people that were involved, people that didn't have, or a lot of them are retired, didn't have any financial interest in anything that we would probably be pursuing. We sat down with them. We have people on the board that have lived experience, people that have lost children, people from all over the state that represent different areas of the states in different fields and expertises that they have, people from the pharmaceutical industry, doctors that were heavy into opioid maintenance. And so that, and also mental health folks that we have on the board to help us be well-rounded, not only in demographic, but by race and gender. I think we're looking at now, we may have a couple openings on the board. We're looking at getting a couple younger people on the board. No disrespect to our great board members, but having an aspect of having that younger point of view, people that are college age, that have been involved in some of our coalitions, to give us that concept of what's appealing to the youth as we delve into new projects going forward. Next slide. We live and die by Exhibit E, is what we got from the attorneys of what we can fund for, not necessarily that we have to, but the parameters of what we can fund for in that deal. And I think these are pretty equal distributed throughout the state. Next slide. We developed a website. We wanted some way to give transparency. So one of the first orders of business was developing a website where people could apply for funding, see what funding was going on, see the progress, see the resources, see funding that was denied, as much as the ones that we approve, and the progress of the ones we approve. It also has as a one-stop shop to connecting about our team, all our documents on there. A lot of the documents that you have seen already are on there, so people can read it and comprehend it. It really saves us a lot of time, and people that are pursuing proposals where we don't have to stop and have lunch with them or have hour meetings with them. They can read the website, and it gives them everything they need to provide a proposal to do that. So in our proposal concept, we wanted to do something coming from the state, and the one beauty about taking this job is that the executive team said, hey, you don't have to deal with the legislature. No disrespect to the legislature, but it is what it is. And dealing with the state, there's a lot of bureaucracy. We wanted to decrease that bureaucracy. So the bureaucracy we have, honestly, is what we create. And we tried to streamline it, and we try to encourage people and develop proposals that are streamlined, where they just have to answer some questions, give us some facts and details, estimates and quotes in that concept to help us make some decisions on the front end, and not deal with timelines and things of that nature. We saw and really vested in the urgency of getting the money out the door as quickly as possible to help people in need, because we have such a large problem in Arkansas. Next slide. So this is a snapshot of the applications received. I think this is as of October 31st. We have received 206 applications, or what we call proposal for settlement funding, totaling $183 million. We've approved 98 of those applications for a total of $22 million. We have 31 projects that are still in what I call in the queue, and we've denied almost 60 projects for about 100,000. 18 and we have 18 applicants that withdrew their application for one reason or the other. Naloxone approved. We were blessed to approve 33,576 kits, 2-dose kits, so almost 67,000 doses of naloxone that we've been able to push out the door. Next slide. So this is an interesting slide. So coming from the state, we knew what the state was doing and what they were not doing. So we really wanted to be careful not to duplicate the money that they were putting in there. In our state, 77% of the dollars that they got in for state and federal funding went toward treatment. About 20% went to prevention. And then the remainder is what went to recovery housing, what you may call transition housing, things of that nature, nothing to law enforcement. Reporting was kind of mixed in there. Education was actually part of prevention. And so we knew what they were doing. So we wanted to put dollars in city and county entities that were outside of the norm, as I would say. Entities that had a heart to really help people, that wanted to weigh in, and also it would also build capacity for them. A lot of times on the state side, entities had to compete for those dollars in their proposals to the state or in their RFPs to the state. And a lot of these small entities did not have the capacity to compete, so it left a lot of gaps in our state. Next slide. You can see where we've put our money in, not heavy on the recovery housing part because the state wasn't funding that. A smaller amount, 2 million, if you want to call 2 million a small amount, into treatment. And a lot of those were detox centers and different programs of that nature. 3.5 million in the law enforcement, and I'll tell you about that down the road. Family support. There was nothing in our state for family support. So we developed, and you'll see a slide a little bit on there. Education, peer recovery specialist is something that we got in and that we knew and helped develop the peer recovery specialist program in the state. So we were very strong backers of encouraging people to hire peers and developing programs that peer recovery specialists, people with lived experience, could be employed. Next slide. So we had this deal where anytime that we would plug in a program, and you can see where we started, we would turn the county purple, and you can see the 75 counties in our state, where we were in January, where we were in February as we started to build projects. And this was something, it was just a goal that we'd set to turn the map purple. And anytime that we funded a program in that county. Next slide. And as we grew, we started turning the map purple. A lot of the purple you see are the high populated areas in our state. Northwest Arkansas, and then also Central Arkansas are the highly populated counties in our state. And you can see where we were in May. Next slide. And moving forward, you can see by August 2023, we were able to fund at least one project in each of the counties that we had going on. So this was, helps us make sure that we're spreading it out. We developed, and I think Colin on slide 17 showed you kind of the systematic program we have. And he talked about having the mayors and county judges sign off on that program. that was really important to us because we, like Colin said, we wanted to make sure that those mayors and county judges had buy-in. As a state drug director, in that 5 years that I was state drug director, I made it a point to try to go to every city and county in the state. And a lot of times I realized that when I was sitting in that room in these big meetings, they were so dependent upon the state to solve all their problems that they didn't have any knowledge of buy-in or what was going on in their county or city themselves. So this gets them right there, a front seat at the table about having that buy-in. It really is good for us too, because it's the first stage of our vetting process where they are actually looking at these people and know these people a lot of times from their own city and county, and they're signing off on their proposal. It doesn't mean that it's going to get approved because it still has to go through the other steps, but it gives us a start on there to say that this mayor and county judge sign off on this proposal and believe in it. Next slide. Kind of see where we're at now, and this is today as we've had to expand our map on where we're going, and it also gives us projects to where we're going to as we move into the second year of AOR. And it's just an interactive map, and Joy puts this together and she pulls her hair out, making sure that it's right. And you can see how we're growing very quickly on there with different projects that we're funding. Next slide. Tell you what, can you go back to that slide? All right, thank you. One of the things that you can do is you can go to our site and you can click on one of these counties. And when you click on one of these counties, it will list to you the projects that are there in that county. And then you can actually click on the project and you can see what their milestones are. You can see what their progress will be and things of that nature, whether they're doing good, whether they're not doing good. That's something that we're doing in there. So like I said, this site is our transparency site. It tells everything about what we're doing. Next slide. So this is a proposal, what we call the general proposal deal. It's for anybody to write a proposal for something that they would like to do. We tell people and encourage people to apply with their heart. Don't look at these dollars as just dollars. We realize that they should realize that this is blood money, that it came off the backs and the pain and suffering of many people in our state, and you ought to apply that. So when we get proposals in to say, hey, I need storm windows, or I need decorative beams, or I need basketball courts, we come back and we ask them, hey, tell me how that abates the opioid epidemic, and read Exhibit E on where that is. So a lot of that's in there. And so that's how we vet and screen out the good ones, I guess for lack of a better term, from the bad ones. Next slide. Recovery beds, you can see where we've gone with that. We've approved 384, and this complements what the state is doing. We're working on an overlay of where the state programs are so we can know that. We're heavy on the men's beds because a lot of the or in the beginning, some of the proposals as you can see on here, were had a lot of beds, like dormitory style beds, which we found weren't very compliant for women who seem to do better in smaller 12 to 20 bed facilities. So that's something, and it kind of gives us an idea of where we need to work in the future to try to balance some of that a little bit. Next slide. Peers. We were able to fund positions for 28 full-time peers throughout different, whether they've been in hospitals, at police departments, drug courts, crisis stabilization units. We were able to expand positions for 28 full-time peers in city and county programs. Next slide. So this is an overdose response team. So this is a new proposal template that we came up, that we partner a peer and a law enforcement investigator to concentrate on investigating an overdose. In our state, we struggle for law enforcement to investigate an overdose after it happens, especially an overdose death is what I'm talking about. Not holding or not putting any pressure on the drug dealer who are poisoning our citizens. And so this allows for that investigator to have specialized training and equipment to handle those investigations, and also partners them with a kind of a unique thing that we develop with a peer recovery specialist to work with the family, to work with the people around that person that may have overdosed, to lead them to recovery. And what we find is in a lot of these teams, we're starting to see numbers of 5 or 6 successful indictments or arrests for distribution that caused death, but we're seeing the peers leading 200 plus people to recovery and treatment services. So in one city that had a high amount, they were experiencing 11 to 15 overdoses per month. They've been able to reduce them down to 2 to 3 because of this team and what they're doing. Next slide. So you can see where we're building those overdose response teams in there. Our state is broke into a series of judicial districts as we kind of freehand outline them in there. And so realizing that we can't fund an overdose response team in every city and county because there's almost 600. So there's no way for us to fund every one of them. We did it by judicial district as a priority. Some of them expand. They want 2 peers. Some of them want 2 investigators. We work with them the best way we can and get them to justify why they need that. You can see where we're going. Of course, this is work in progress. Next slide, please. So our HERO project was one of our first projects. We realized that we wanted to get naloxone out there. So what we did is we worked out at the time with BioEmergent to buy $1 million worth of naloxone. We became the super users of that account. We didn't want them to deliver it. We wanted $1 million in credit. And then as people would apply for this HERO project, we would make them a sub-user where they could actually order directly from the distributor, BioEmergent at the time, and they could get naloxone in it as they needed it, because we knew that expiration started, and a lot of times entities wanted to order a lot of naloxone and ended up in their closet or someplace that they had to find storage space. So this, they can get it when they need it and put it out to, in this case, in the beginning was to cities and counties, citizens in the cities and counties, not law enforcement, because law enforcement for a long time had been on a program for the state and had naloxone. Next slide. You can see to date, we've purchased $2 million or well over $2 million in naloxone. We have 43 what we call the HERO programs going out. And a lot of times we focused on recovery centers. Churches jumped on this. Crisis stabilization units have been the champions of this and are pushing it out there. And in August, we started to realize that the state's law enforcement program was struggling. They just were not getting it out the door. And so we boosted that, and we were able to, and you'll see a slide on this, where we were able in 2 days to push it out to 236 law enforcement agencies in need, and pushed out naloxone to fill up their need of that, with the encouragement in the future for them to budget for it through the normal budget process. And you can see today we've distributed over 33,000 kits in the state in 1 year. So we're pretty proud of that number. Next slide. You can see where our HERO projects are and where they're not. Areas that we really need to work in. A lot of the rural areas are the ones that are not. And it's just trying to find somebody reliable to get them, encourage them to apply for this HERO program. We don't pay them money for training to put that out there. We give them the naloxone where they can order it. And a lot of times our ones that are on board already have programs, and they really like having the naloxone because it's a real draw for people to come in and get it. and they were able to give it to them for free and train them on their own dime. So it saves a lot of the money that's out there in our program. Next slide. So this is the law enforcement naloxone that we got in. You can see the pallets that we brought on to push that out, and then we had all the agencies show up over a 2-day period to come and pick up naloxone, and we were able to get it. And we just told them, how much do you need? And you can see the rate that we got it at. We actually changed companies from BioEmergent and got a cheaper rate, and so it worked really good for us. Next slide. Coalition deal. We had some conversations early on. How can we build coalitions in our state? People that would, as you know, help with on the prevention side. And then we talked about investing in them and teaching them how to apply for drug-free communities funding going forward. And so what we were able to do, I think we can go to the next slide. What we were able to do is give a one-time amount of $25,000 with some requirements in there that they had to attend required training. And if they attended those required trainings, we found that in most cases that the awardees could apply for that DFC funding, which have the ability to bring in that DFC money for over a period of 5 years. So you can see the calculations there. We invested $325,000 into 13 coalitions, $25,000 a piece. And our hopes is that when they complete this training, they'll apply for that DFC funding, which could bring in $8,125,000 to them if they're successful. They were able to apply that into 15 counties and 13 coalitions. And we also set a requirement that they had to mentor another coalition outside of their area. And so this would increase, and every 2 years we would do this project to see how successful it was. Right now, I think we're on stance that we believe that half of the 13 will apply for that DFC funding and have a good chance of getting it based upon our trainers. Next slide. Direct proposal. These are proposals that are come up by the team, like the Naloxone Hero program, different proposals that we recognize need to go on within our state or to fill gaps in our state. Maybe where a state program is not funded anymore, or something that's actually brought out of the leadership team. Next slide. This is the Hope Movement. This was actually a directed proposal one. This was the family program that we put together to give support to families, a lot of times families that have lost. And it doesn't have to particularly be there. They assign a case manager. They're working with our coroners to get resources out there. Sometimes they provide burial assistance and grief assistance in all cases. And it's just a growing organization within our state to really help the parents and friends of loved ones that are struggling or have lost their struggle. Next slide. So this is our contact information. I would encourage you guys to go to our website and look through our website. You'll find all this information on there. But these are our contact information if we can help you. And I think at this point, time permitting, we'll be available for questions if there's any.
Excellent, y'all. And if you have any questions, please raise your virtual hand, or you can put it in the chat, because we do have some time for questions. I have a question while folks are collecting their thoughts. And we did, as part of our pre-read, send out a link to y'all's website. I had a question about, like, how much of the fund, how did you balance seed money? Because it looks like y'all are seeding some programs with the assumption that the state will then carry on funding, like the coalitions. How much of y'all's funding on the outset was used to do that kind of stuff? Like what in terms of percentages? Because that seems like it makes a lot of sense, especially since that first year of funding and is such a large amount.
I don't think we have a set amount of percentages in there. Our hopes is that our coalitions will self-sustain. In any of our programs, that's one of the questions. How will you sustain after the dollars are done? And so some of our programs are 1 year money, some of our programs are 2 or 3 year money. It just really depends on the program and what they're trying to achieve.
Okay. So the length of time of the things that y'all are funding is also differs depending on the proposal.
Yes.
Y'all,
And
anybody have questions?
every
Alan?
project has to demonstrate sustainability and be able to somehow fund themselves when the AOR money runs out, regardless of what type of project it is. That's one
Okay.
of the requirements in the application.
That's
Hey,
great.
I had a question, Jennifer.
Yeah.
So here in Florida, we know a lot of this funding is going to be for 18 years, and so sometimes the funding as it comes down, it's going to be like a big balloon payment the first year, and then a drastically reduced amount for the next 17 years. How are you guys there in Arkansas dealing with that kind of balloon payment initially, and then the next 17 at a really reduced amount?
Want me to address that, Kirk? We, the lawyers, are doing everything we can to figure out and anticipate future revenue. You are correct. There's a dozen or so settlements. They're all on different time frames. There's only one that's 18 years. There's some that are 7, 9, 11. They're all over the place. They all have different payment amounts each year. They don't pay the same amount each year for 7 years. It's more, it's less, it's more, it's less. And they pay at different times of the year, and those dates are constantly changing. So you cannot know right now how much money is going to come into Florida counties and cities in 2024. But you can make an educated guess, and you can, we just keep up in real time as well as we can and make sure we keep a bit of a prudent reserve balance within the QSF and for the partnership in case, for whatever reason, we go 6 months, 9 months without getting any money. We don't have to just pause, we can still, and we'll adjust. And I update the board at every advisory board meeting, and Kirk and his team and the leadership, anytime they ask, what's our money situation look like? I give them the best real-time information we have. And that's all you can do.
Any follow-up questions, Alan?
Oh, what's up?
Awesome.
I have
So-
one follow-up answer to that. So I think that's one of the reasons that we don't really want to fund something for the whole 18 years. Because we know this is going to change, whether it's funding or even the complexities of the drug situation that we're facing, and we know it's going to change. So if we get stuck in a deal where we're funding a program for the next 18 years, it's not going to leave us monies to deal with those changes and be adaptable. So that's why we don't go really out past 3 years in that program, in hopes that they will. In essence, we're funding a lot of pilot programs. The hope that they will find, or the cities and counties will find, sustainability. Our dollars are focused on cities and counties. And if it's a bigger program and we get some of them that are statewide aspects that we can solve all the state programs, we kick those to the AG, who has the other third from that state aspect.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, you talked about workforce development or developing a peer workforce. Is there other, I think that, Florida's not alone. I think throughout the US, we have a critical workforce shortage for all behavioral health, for everyone in behavioral health. And so I was wondering if there was other things that y'all are doing to build up the behavioral health workforce. And
I think we worked really hard, Tanisha and I did, when we were on the state side, of developing that peer recovery specialist program, people with lived experience to develop that program in the state. So we're trying to help expand that. And I know the state has found some money to push peers into the drug courts to help the judges in there. But it's one-time money for them, so I imagine a lot of them are gonna apply to us once that money dries up, because it's city and county intensive, and I get it. But that gives us 1 year of, did their program work, or are they just, sucking up the money and not working? So we're gonna ask them for data on that. I can tell you another program we're looking at now combining the peer recovery specialists with the preventionist concept to work in schools. So they get more than just telling their story. They have a prevention aspect that can help that school and build coalitions in that school. We believe in the coalition process because we've seen it work, and trying to expand that. And we're calling that a prevention recovery specialist is what we're calling it. So look for that in 24 is something that we're working on right now.
And in the chat, Amanda Bonham Lovett asked about harm reduction services. So you talked about naloxone. Are there any other harm reduction services that y'all are funding, like syringe service programs?
We don't do syringe service program. The state doesn't do syringe service programs in our state. We have studied it. It was during my state role, it was something that the governor at the time sent me to Kentucky to study their program. It came back with pluses and minuses. It's nothing that the state wanted to pursue. We didn't pursue it because it's evidence-based, and Exhibit E is heavy evidence-based. We stay strong on the naloxone because it's very evidence-based, where some of the other aspects like fentanyl test strips and were not evidence-based, as we found it in there. It was not a direction that we wanted to put our dollars in. We were seeing the win-win with naloxone and the amount of saves and the amount of people that were going and getting treatment after that effect. And in the mindset of the new era of the new drugs that are coming down, like fentanyl and xylazine and things like that, we realized that any drug could be your last. And so we didn't want to promote a safe use mindset. And I know there's a big controversy in the harm reduction world, but we didn't want to promote a safe use mindset. We wanted to promote a rescue type mindset with the hopes that people would find a pathway, whatever their pathway was, to abstinence.
I appreciate that you're I appreciate the consistency between like thinking through what kind of mindset you want to put through and what kind of programs you're supporting. And I think that this is, what there's also differences. And I think that kind of the takeaway is just to make sure that whatever your mindset is in terms of tackling this crisis, that it's consistent with what you're funding, how you're spending the money. And I think that there's integrity there, and difference between communities, because every community feels differently about different things. Any other questions, y'all? Anything? All right. Well, if I've sent y'all the slide deck, or the link to the AORP's website, and in the pre-read. I'll resend that out after. And if it's all right with our presenters, I can also share their slide deck with you, if that's okay. And sounds like, yep, I'm seeing head shakes, and their contact information is in there. So if there's any follow-up questions or any kind of deeper dives that you want to do, we can do it at that time. And if there's no other questions, then what I can do is I'll thank you both for joining us, and for the work that you're doing in Arkansas. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to show us a glimpse into another state and how they're tackling this crisis, or collection of counties and cities, and how they're tackling this opportunity through all the money, but also the crisis and how to overcome this opioid epidemic. So thank you for